Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today, I bring you Jordan Harbinger. You feel out of balance in your life, like your family and your work are your priorities, but you don't have enough time in the day, so you're shortchanging them both? Not to mention wanting to work out more or do more of the things that you love. Are you easily distracted and you want to be able to stay more focused so you can lock in on the most important things that you know you should be doing? You want to be more consistent so you can achieve those goals that always seem just out of reach. Or maybe you feel like you just lack the motivation that it takes to get there. Or maybe you're just not clear on what the right first step actually is. Like every time you're about to take action, you doubt whether or not it's the right action or the right goal. I know the feeling. I've got a wife and 4 kids. I have a job, a rental property, this podcast, not to mention the inevitable challenges that just come up with life, like, illness and struggling family members or car trouble. I've got a lot going on. But when I was a Division I All-American athlete, I was completely locked in. I was focused, I was balanced, and I knew exactly what I wanted and the steps that I had to take to get it. But when I got into the real world, things got a lot more complex. There's just a lot more time demands. Like everything seems to be a priority. How are you supposed to figure out what's the right next step for you? Well, I've developed a system that helps you do just that. Find the balance, the clarity, the focus that you're looking for so you can take your life to the next level. So you can start seeing the dreams that are in your mind as realistic goals and have a plan to achieve them. I've opened a few spots on my calendar for free 30-minute strategy calls so you can take that first step toward the life that you've always dreamed about. Just one simple step, one small commitment that will give you huge results, a simple phone call that will leave you with a plan. If you want this life, if you want to truly have a breakthrough, claim one of the few spots open on my calendar, and I'll share with you the formula that has had people who I work with saying things like one of my recent coaching clients, Frank, who said, "My only regret is that I didn't do this 20 years ago." Or like Isaac, who said, "I love this version of myself the best, and I'll do anything to keep it going." I've got dozens more quotes like that. If you want to feel the same way, go to jimharshawjr.com/apply. That's jimharshawjr.com/apply. Jordan is a Wall Street lawyer turned talk show host, social dynamics expert, and entrepreneur. He's the owner and co-founder of The Art of Charm, a consulting and coaching company, as well as a top 50 podcast on iTunes, which he's been hosting for over a decade. The Art of Charm receives over 2.5 million downloads per month and growing.
Oh, hey, that's old. It's 3.8 right now.
3.8? Oh, my goodness. Yeah. No, we'll just keep on rolling. I don't need to edit. We're just, yeah. Authenticity is good. So I was actually listening to your interview, Jordan, and just a little side note, from like a year ago with John Vroman on the Front Row Factor, whose podcast, I was on his and he was on mine a while back. And you said about 2 million, and that was about a year ago, so now you're well above. So anyway, he's killing it. Jordan has traveled around the world and has worked for various governments and NGOs overseas. He's traveled through war zones and even been kidnapped twice. He'll tell you that the only reason he's still alive and kicking is because of his ability to talk his way into and out of just about any type of situation. Jordan's company trains individuals and companies that want to learn the elements of emotional intelligence and to become more persuasive, confident, and charismatic. His unique talents and experiences make him one of the best and most sought-after coaches in the world. For the listener, as always, if you don't have time to listen to the entire episode, or if you have you hear something, you don't have a chance to write it down, make sure you grab your free copy of the action plan from this episode. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Well, you've been at this for quite a while, 10 years or so now with your podcast. And so just give us a little bit of a background, kind of a life background. Where did you come from and sort of how did you get from there to where you're at now?
Yeah, so I started, man, I'm doing the show for over 10 years. I started as a Wall Street attorney, and I basically got hired by this guy who was never in the office. And I decided that that's what I needed to do because I was probably going to get fired because I didn't belong there. Because if you go back earlier in my career, I guess you would say, as a kid, I sort of coasted through high school because I paid attention and, had a little bit of I hate to say it, but a natural affinity for learning some of this stuff. And I could read well. I mean, really, the bar's low when you're talking about high school, right? So then when I got to college, everybody was as smart or smarter than me, but they were all drinking and partying all the time and couldn't really take care of themselves because they were not mature enough. So all I did at that point was outwork everybody. Oh, you want to go get wasted 5 days in a row? No, I'm going to actually do my homework. Okay, fine. So that got me decent enough grades. And the same thing in law school, where all the kids there, or adults there at that point, were used to being the smartest people around, not having to work that hard. So I was able to outwork them too. But by the time I got to Wall Street, I realized that everybody was really smart and everybody was a workhorse at that level. So what I needed to do at that point was basically figure out how to not get fired. And the best way to do that for me, in my mind, was to just make myself scarce. So I when I saw that the partner who'd hired me was never in the office, I was like, okay, how do I kind of get that sort of arrangement in the next few years where maybe people won't see my poor work habits and I can sort of fudge it? I know this is a terrible strategy, but I had a imposter syndrome and was really worried that I wasn't cut out to be there. Little did I know everybody there pretty much felt the exact same way. I just, you think it's only you at that point when you think about those types of things. And so one day I saw him and I said, actually HR kind of made him take me out for coffee because he was supposed to mentor me, but he was never around. And of course, the Wall Street version of mentoring that I was hoping for was, Wolf of Wall Street style, doing oyster shooters on the roof with Matthew McConaughey talking about all the money we're making or something. No, it was more like him showing up once every 2 months and saying, oh, all right, yeah, let's go to Starbucks because there's one in the lobby. And he took me down there and he's banging away on his BlackBerry and he's like, sure. So if you have any questions, you can just ask me. And I thought, well, I'm not sure. How come you're never in the office, but you're a partner? I mean, do you just work from home all the time? And he said, yeah, well, I don't just work from home. I bring in a lot of the deals for the firm. And so I don't really worry about my billable hours because even though that's what everybody else is doing, working till 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, trying to get things done, I don't really worry about my billable hours because what I can do is bring in a deal. And if I bring in, he didn't give me the numbers, but I did the math later. Basically, if he brings in $1 million law deal once a quarter, his percentage commission on that deal is so much more than any billable hours bonus he could possibly get that he doesn't really need to worry about it. He just needs to run the deal, but he doesn't have to worry about clocking it all in. So the firm is able to pay him. He's able to basically write his own ticket because he's got the book of business, and his job largely consists of making sure he's available to hang out and generate rapport and relationships with people when those opportunities arise. So he would go get up in the morning and go work out with somebody, and then he'd go to jujitsu with somebody else, and then he'd play squash on Tuesdays and Thursdays with somebody else. And there's a charity event 2 times a week, and there's a boat trip on the weekend, and he goes fishing. And I just thought, this is not bad. He's a guy from Brooklyn who had a tan. So he was doing something right.
And so he found basically leverage points, right? I mean, he is working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, he exactly. He figured what he found. I don't know if he figured this, but what he found was that his unique advantage was developing relationships and creating a network and probably just keeping that network active and maintaining those relationships. And so nobody else is doing that. They were all, I'm going to keep my head down and work. And they were good at that. And he was probably naturally social his whole life or something like that. Or he had learned these skills. Who knows? And so he was had rare skills compared to the other people in the firm, which was a huge advantage. Because if you've got these rare skills like that, then other people will want you to do it because you're bringing in deals for the firm. And in addition to that, nobody's really competing with you because they're all like, okay, well, if you're going to bring in a deal, I'm going to service the deal. And they're probably going, oh, I'm glad I don't have to go out and network. It's so awkward. Meanwhile, he's playing golf.
Yeah.
So he's not thinking, oh, I got to go to this networking event. But all these other guys, these workhorse partners, they hated that stuff. I've been to those events with those same people. They would stand in the corner with a drink in front of them and go, I guess I got to get home to my wife pretty soon. And they'd bounce. Meanwhile, he's not going to a mixer. He's playing golf with 3 people. He's going to jujitsu and rolling around the floor. That's what real relationship development was like. And so I got a glimpse at that and how effective that was. And I realized, oh, you don't have to grow up going to some private school in England wearing a blazer to have a good network. And further, the other way that I thought to get a network was, well, you keep your head down for like 8 or 10 years. And then you wake up one morning and you have a network because you've been in the game for so long. And that wasn't really true either. You might know a bunch of people, but you don't necessarily have relationships with them after that amount of time. You have to be deliberate with it. And he really was doing that and nobody else was. So they were more than happy to pay him a huge amount of money to go and do those things because it meant they could avoid awkward social situations and focus on what they were good at. And I thought, that's a deal I want, because even if everybody eventually figured that out, it probably would have taken them 5 years. They would have worked, and just like everybody else was. And I wasn't not working, just to be clear. You still have to do it, but I was putting in the extra time on the side, learning that skill set. I figured by the time anybody caught up with me, I would have a time advantage, which was the only advantage I was going to have at that point, right? Because I wasn't going to make myself smarter, really. That was unlikely. And I'm certainly not going to be able to get more hours in the day to bill more hours. So that was the only competitive advantage that was available. Yeah. It really was the only competitive advantage that was even available at all.
And we all, everybody listening to this podcast wants to get ahead, right? They want to, at the end of the day, we all want to make more money, all right? It may not be the most important thing to us, but we know that everybody wants to, advance their career, make more money, work less, right? So how do we find that leverage point? How do we become indispensable in our work? Because maybe our job doesn't entail necessarily going out and getting deals, but how do we find that leverage point and become indispensable so that the boss can't come in and say, here's your pink slip, or so that the boss does, putting it in the positive, the boss comes in and says, hey, listen, we need you on this higher level project, or we need you to stop doing this grunt work so you can do more of this stuff that you're really good at.
Yeah, essentially what happened with him was that he had accidentally figured this out. And they weren't about to tell a first-year associate, hey, you should start learning how to network. Because the thing is, most people didn't even value this. Does that make sense? They didn't even understand it. They just I guarantee you that if I could go back in time and ask all the other partners what they thought, they'd probably just be like, oh, yeah, Dave knows everybody. I don't think they would go, yeah, Dave spends a lot of time networking and developing relationships. I think they literally just figured it happened to him.
Yeah, because so other people weren't really seeing the value in what he was doing. They were going, oh, he's just good at that, or that's just kind of what his job is, or that's just whatever happened to him. But you can intentionally kind of create this value. If you see the value, you can recognize it and take action on it.
Yeah, I honestly think that they probably saw the value. They just didn't understand the component parts. So they probably went, man, Dave always brings in these great deals. Good for him. I don't think they said, well, he's going to jiu-jitsu to foster a relationship with somebody there who's an investment banker at Lehman Brothers or whatever, right? They weren't thinking those are the pieces of the puzzle. They were just going, look, Dave takes a lot of time off, but nobody messes with him because he brings in $4 million worth of work every year. I think that's what they were probably thinking. Very few people probably would have said, yeah, Dave needs to go on a cruise and we need to pay for it. The managing partner probably did. And that's probably why Dave had a, Amex Black card, so that all of those things were, I assume, paid for by the firm. Because he would say, look, this is business development. And they went, okay, well, this guy gave us $1 million law deal last quarter, so we believe you. Whereas I think I'm not convinced, went, look, I need to go do jujitsu every week with these Lehman Brothers guys because they're going to throw me a deal. I think he just went, I got a sweet deal. I just get to go do jujitsu. Of course, they're going to throw me the deal. You know, we're friends. What are they going to do? Give it to somebody else?
Right. Because you have the relationship.
Right. So I don't think this was even something that they formally thought of at the time. But I'll tell you what, Dave left the firm and joined another firm as a partner as soon as things started going downhill with the economy. And all of the other partners in the real estate department, they just retired. And I'm talking about got retired, not like, oh, well, I've worked enough. I think they really, I'm laughing and I shouldn't be. I think they got retired because it was like, oh, crap. If you're a partner and you owe part of what the firm liabilities were, you can't ever earn any other income. So I think they just went, we're out of here. And some of these guys were in their 50s. I mean, they had prime earning potential after that, and it was gone. It got evaporated by the economy. And Dave went and took his book of business and went to another firm, and that was it. So who knows? Maybe he got a raise.
And Dave probably be fair to say that he probably is emotionally intelligent. Why, we talked about in the intro, people, you help people become more persuasive, confident, and charismatic. I imagine that's Dave, right? Who's probably persuasive, confident, and charismatic. Why is that stuff important, and how do we develop those things?
The reason that it's important because obviously it's the beginning of starting relationships, and it's why people know, like, and trust you, right? So you have to get people to know, like, and trust you if they're going to do business with you. And it's better to be trusted, of course, than liked. It's better to be liked and trusted. And it's definitely not going to be valuable to be liked and trusted if nobody knows who you are, right? So those should be pretty self-evident, I think. But the way that we work that is discrete skill sets, and this was a tricky thing for me to learn too, because there's a lot of courses out there like Dale Carnegie, and there's nothing wrong with Dale Carnegie, but it's not exactly advanced level stuff here. We're talking about these courses are for people who are like, well, I have to give talks to rooms full of 10 people and I'm shy, so I freeze up when I go up in front of the conference room. That's what those courses are for. And I realized this because I started dedicating myself to the study of charisma and relationships and rapport and things like that once I figured out what Dave was doing, and eventually became my business here at the Art of Charm, because I left the legal profession as a result of learning how powerful these skills actually were. And the beautiful part of this was I thought, okay, I got to dedicate my life to this. I have a huge time advantage. And we started talking about it on the Art of Charm podcast. And we found that a lot of people, high performers especially, were people that were really interested in this, because a lot of our clients, our first clients, before we even knew we were selling anything, were bankers and investors and mortgage folks and stuff like that, because they were in the relationship business. And I didn't really get that either, because I was so young at the time, and I was 27, so I didn't really think about this stuff. And it became a really important skill set, because I thought, okay, I'm going to take a Dale Carnegie class, I'm going to take a speaking class, and I'm going to take all these different courses. But the problem arises, of course, when you go to these classes and they teach you something like, you're at the YMCA, right? And there's a guy in a sweater vest telling you how to remember people's names or something. And I realized, okay, I learned eye contact and firm handshake, and these are all good basics. But here's the thing. If somebody is not promoting you at work, and the guy you hired 3 years ago is now your boss, it's not because you don't have a firm handshake, man. It's because people don't like you, or you're not performing in some other way. And if they're not telling you what it is, it's this sort of intangibles and soft skills that they figure that you probably can't learn. So a lot of the guys that come through the Art of Charm boot camps in LA, we'll get everybody from special forces, Green Berets, and guys who want an edge, because those guys always want an edge no matter what. But a lot of the people that come through, especially recently, it'll be examples. Somebody at Amazon who's like, hey, I've been at Amazon for 6 years. Great. Well, I haven't gotten promoted in 2.5 years. And the reason is because I'm not a manager. I'm not manager material. And I'm thinking, wow, that's weird. So they're frozen. And other people who are like right adjacent to the C-suite in their company, And they're like, yeah, I just can't make it in there. And I know it's because I don't have the right kind of relationships. So you really do get stuck in this. There's a glass ceiling, sort of an invisible ceiling that you won't move past, because at a certain point, everything is about who you know. And whenever people say, oh, it's all about who you know, they always put a little bit of stank on it. Like, it's all about who you know. And it's usually them whining about not getting something they feel they were owed, right?
Sure.
Very rarely do you go, well, it's all about who you know, and then brush your shoulders off and put on your new suit and go to your new job. Very rarely, because for some reason, especially in the United States, we like to think that we're this merit-based society where, like, you just keep your head down and you work hard. To an extent, that's true. You should keep your head down and work hard. But if you're not making and creating relationships and maintaining them, you're just being willfully ignorant of the secret game being played around you. And the problem is, when you're willfully ignorant of those consequences, you're not immune to the consequences. You're fully subject to them. You're a victim of them instead of actually playing the game and getting your due. Yeah. Because you're thinking like, oh, well, John, all he does is network. Well, yeah, you know what, though? There's value there. It's not just brown nosing.
Yeah, I think it was Chris Rock that said 80% of people in America have their job because of somebody they know. And I found that to be very true.
Well, those are real statistics. I didn't know that was a Chris Rock thing, but 80% of people find, and maybe this is just a coincidental statistics thing, 80% of jobs are found through the network. If you look at, and these are maybe old stats, but if you look at these pie charts where it's like monster.com, it's like 3% of jobs. You know?
Sure.
And that's all online job services, not just monster.com. It's all online job search. And then it's like recruiters, 2%. And those are only high level positions, because that's why you hire a recruiter. You don't hire recruiters for the burrito wrappers at Chipotle, right? But 80% are found through the network. And when I first read that, I went, that's BS. I got my job because, well, actually,
right. Yeah, me too. When I read the same thing, I was like, well, I had that job. Well, I guess I knew those people. And I got this job. Well, I guess I knew them too. And yeah, it's always been like that, I found. So
I tried to think of a counterexample, and I was like, no, my movie theater job that I got when I was 16. Well, no, Johnny kind of told the manager and he handed him my application. Like every single thing I've ever done has always been via someone else. And it makes perfect sense, right? It makes perfect sense. And then even even when I got hired on Wall Street, and this hiring process at this point in time was like, they go to a hotel. The law school has a sign-up sheet for interviews. You go to this hotel, they've got their rooms, all the doors are open, and they're conducting these mini interviews to pre-screen people. And you sign up and you go there and you do the interview and blah, 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 and then they fly you out to New York. I didn't get the interviews with the places that I want. What happened was I ran into my old roommate from undergrad who said, hey, his old roommate from undergrad that I knew is working at this firm. Go say hi. And I went like, go say hi. Who cares if I go say hi? But I randomly passed the room that guy was in and I heard Jordan. So I backed up and I looked in there and he goes, hey, what's going on, man? I haven't seen you. And I was like, all right, small talk, whatever. And he goes, hey, give me your resume, man. I was like, really? Yeah. He goes, yeah, just here. And he goes, hey, Jim, are you free right now for another interview? And the guy's shoveling a Subway sandwich into his mouth for like his 15-minute lunch break that he's got. And he's like, if you don't mind me eating, sure, we can do it now. And I went like, I really don't know much about your firm. And he goes, don't even worry about it, man. I go, all right. He goes, here's a resume. The guy looks at it and goes, oh, okay, not bad. Pushes it aside into like the yes pile or something and goes, so yeah, Thatcher Profit and Wood, I know you didn't sign up for this interview, so whatever. And he goes, would you ever live in New York? And I'm like, yeah, New York is awesome. And he goes, cool. What are some of your favorite subjects in that you studied in law school? Okay, cool. Well, which departments are you looking at? You're looking at financial derivatives, real estate? And I was like, yeah, real estate. He goes, cool. All right. Well, yeah, we'll call you. I'm going to finish eating. And I went, okay, well, obviously I didn't get that job, like that wasn't it. And I got a call that day. Yeah, we want to fly you out to New York. And the reason was because that guy, Jeremy, who was the roommate of my old roommate, that I ran into, probably went, yeah, he's cool. And they went, all right. Whatever. That was it.
Yeah,
that was my job interview.
It's the hidden job market. I mean, I'm working with one of my coaching clients right now. His job's going to get eliminated in like 6 months, and we've been talking about this hidden job market, and that's where he's finding these connections and these opportunities now because he's hustling to like connect with people and rebuild relationships, and which he's kind of let go, he said, over the years. And now that he's actually paying attention, he's able to rekindle them, but he sees the value in this network.
Of course, there's always the value there that here's something that I realized, it took me years. When you're in the very beginning of your career, which a lot of people listening maybe are not, right? They're a little more advanced, and I'll get to that in a second. But if you're in the very beginning of your career, let's say you're 27, or if you're a professional, maybe you just graduated from law school, you're 25, whatever. You show up. The only real differentiator are your soft skills. Do people like you? Are you charismatic? Do you develop relationships easily? Because you're equally useless as everybody else who has an undergrad degree in business and can basically, work on a team and use Excel or whatever those skill sets really are. And you have some sort of like theoretical academic knowledge of what, like technical analysis or some financial stuff, right?
Sure. You all took the same classes.
Yeah, you all took the same classes. Okay, somebody has better macro game than you on Excel, right? That's it, and is a little bit faster with the Word documents and formatting. But other than that, no. So really your soft skills set you apart. And then somewhere in the middle of your career, you realize, oh, I'm building technical skills and everything. And you kind of, maybe you put the soft skill development to the side and you're really busy and you got married and you had kids and, you show up to work and you keep your head down and you work and your soft skills either wane or stay the same. But then when you get towards management level, especially upper management level, it's all about who you know. It's all about those connections. It's all about those long-standing relationships. So if you're the person who worked in the basement coding the CRM software for the company and everybody else was out doing building relationships, creating teams, working on those teams, switching teams, building a product, switching teams again, that person has a massive advantage over you because once it comes time for decision, who is the person who's got roots in other departments? Who's the person that has universal respect? Who's the person? It's not the guy who sat down and created, even if the product is amazing and it makes the company $1 billion, you might get a pat on the back, but you're not going to get a management position because of it. It's just the way it works. So soft skills are very important at the beginning of your career and they're very important at the top of your career. The problem is, you have a huge gap in between there where people kind of don't necessarily see the value, so they just let them die. And that's the problem, is people are inconsistent with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the one thing that I know that my listeners are wanting me to ask you is, you were kidnapped twice. We said it in the intro, and we're talking about these soft skills. It wasn't just your Eagle Scout, because I know you're an Eagle Scout. It wasn't just your Eagle Scout skills that got you out of that, but it was the soft skills that allowed you to, we're talking about how we use this in the business world, but I know you started your podcast with, initially you were talking more about relationships before you evolved into business, but talk about how these kind of skills helped you get out of these kidnapping incidents.
Yeah, so the short version, the first one was, it's funny, they sort of illustrate my skill set development. The first time I got kidnapped, I was 20. And I just had to fight because it was a taxi driver. I was behind him. He stopped the car. There was an altercation. I won that because I was 20 and I worked out every day, and he was 50 and he sat in a car all day. So you can imagine that kind of outcome, right? And he was probably like 5'5". I mean, I don't know. I don't remember. He was sitting down, right? So he wasn't a big Mexican guy. He was just and there were no mobile phones, so he couldn't call for his friends. We stopped in front of the place and he goes, I'm going to get out and ask for help. So that's the short version of that story.
Right.
But then later on, I was working in Serbia as an English teacher, and I had a scholarship, well, sort of a stipend / job with the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense. So their state security guys were always tracking me and stuff, and they just got a hold of me one day. And I just kept talking and keeping him calm and talking and keeping him calm and building trust until finally I was like, look, I need water. And then they were like, oh, all right, fine. Because I just kept playing that card over and over. So the guy left the area, and I took that opportunity to bounce. And I'm sure he was probably surprised when he came back, because he was probably like, I thought we were getting along. I mean, I really spent a lot of time. Yeah. And he's like, oh, man, thought we were getting somewhere, But I knew that they also had a friend of mine, and he was not. That was going sideways. And I thought, what happens when they shoot him? They're going to have to get rid of me too. So I'm not risking that, So
good call.
I used that particular skill set. But these guys were super angry. I mean, they were super high. I think they were on meth. We're not talking about Serbian version of professionally trained FBI. We're talking about Bosnian militia guys who probably had their village burned down, and now they happen to have a job with the government so that they don't have to get prosecuted. I mean, civil wars are messy, right? So the winning, quote unquote, winning side always has to kind of do something with the soldiers that did bad stuff. And the way that they sort of reward those people is by often giving them jobs in the government. And I'm like, why couldn't you make them mail carriers again? Why would you give them a gun and a badge? It's the worst idea ever. But I guess, some moronic general somewhere said they're loyal to the regime. So now they're doing security. And the problem is they're essentially just homegrown, terror. They're just punks. It's a gang. And so they were not professionally trained. If they were professionally trained, I mean, you're not going to make friends with your FBI agent. And he's going to go, let's let him go. That's not going to happen, But with these guys, I was able to sort of make that happen. But that's what we're training. These are the type of skills that we teach the Green Berets and SEAL Team 6 before the Bin Laden mission and things like that, were these same skill sets: building trust quickly, keeping people calm, keeping yourself calm, building rapport and trust, because then you can weasel an opportunity in there to perhaps save yourself, whereas you might not have had one before.
Jordan, we only have a few minutes left with you, and there are two pressing questions that I really want to ask you. And the first one is this. You have this incredibly successful company. You've shared much of your story with us here, and now you're working with elite performers like SEAL Team 6, et cetera. Can you tell us about a time where you failed and you felt that hopelessness, that self-doubt that comes with failure along your journey from where you were to where you are?
When I started the company with my business partners, we didn't have a whole lot of capital. Surprise. And the problem is there's common advice out there that's like, never hire your friends, and every new entrepreneur is like, what kind of idiot would hire their friends? But here's what really happens. Unless you raise capital, which is why a lot of companies do this, to hire professionals and keep it business-like, you have to find somebody that believes in your vision and believes in you enough to work for less than they're worth. So who are those people? Your family and your friends, right? So it's really easy to be like, never hire your friends. And then everybody pats themselves on the back because they followed that advice. That's because they're a solopreneur or they raised money. But if you're anywhere in between, if you're bootstrapping, you're hiring your friends. You just are. You need them unless you're a solopreneur. So I hired a bunch of my friends, and man, I'll tell you, as soon as there was money on the table, a lot of these guys turned into, I didn't even know who they were anymore. And it was amazing because I grew up in Michigan and I thought everyone's going to have a great work ethic. And it turned out that not everybody had that same work ethic, and they had different ideas about what work was, and they had different ideas about what they were entitled to as a result of the work. You find, I want to reinvest in this business, and they go, I want to go to Bermuda. And you go, well, okay, but we're not doing that. And for some reason, some people think that what they want is equally as valid as what's good for the business. And you find that stuff out the hard way, especially in your 20s. So, man, I'll tell you, I went from having $1 million business in the middle of a recession with my business partner, AJ and Johnny, and we were very stoked, to having to fire pretty much everyone, having them go around town telling everybody that we're terrible people, suing us, and essentially settling with these yahoos. And then me thinking, all right, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. This is BS. It's too hard. But now it's kind of funny looking back on that, to think that was enough to sink the ship. I needed to zoom out a little bit more. Now that my timeline is longer, I can see why that happened. But I mean, it's easy to say don't hire your friends as an experienced entrepreneur. And I think it is generally good advice. But I also know it's kind of like saying don't lose money on the stock market. Everyone goes, yeah, all right, I got it. Wrote it down on the whiteboard in my office. And then you play and you lose.
Sure. Yeah. And so I want the listener to understand, like, it's easy for him to say this, rattle this off in 30 seconds or 1 minute, but there were dark days. There were times of doubt and hopelessness when those struggles came along. So your failure, your struggle, your adversity, that is a normal part of success. And Jordan, last question. If I'm bought in, for the listener, I'm bought into, okay, I want to become more persuasive. I want to become more confident. I want to become more charismatic. What's an action item that they can do, something they can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start becoming more persuasive, more confident, more charismatic, so that they can achieve some of their goals?
Oh, man. Okay, so I have like 40 seconds to do this, but this is called the doorway drill. I'm not going to tell you why it works because I don't have time, but if you want to create good, open, positive body language, stand up straight, shoulders back, chin up, chest out. Don't exaggerate. You'll look like a weirdo. And do this, reset your body to this position every time you walk through a doorway. And the way to do that is to put a Post-it note up in every doorway that you walk through multiple times per day, like your office, your home, etc., put a Post-it note up eye level in the door frame so that it breaks you out of your autopilot mode, which is, normally you walk through a door, you don't think about it. The Post-it note will remind you to reset your body language. What this then does is creates open, positive, confident body language every time you walk through a door. And every time you enter a room, generally you walk through a door. So that becomes the first impression, nonverbal first impression that you make on everybody. And we know that we create our first impressions nonverbally because, and if you want to test this, go to the mall and you'll find yourself making judgments about everybody that you see. We're evolved to do that. So what we want to do is have that great nonverbal first impression, which creates a positive nonverbal first impression in everybody that sees us when we walk into a room. That creates a behavior system where not only are we behaving a little differently, but people are treating us differently, which reinforces the change in our own behavior. Does that make sense? That was really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the listener, we're going to have that summarized in the action plan. We're going to have all the links to Jordan's podcast, to his website, to his social media, and all the tips and tactics that he just shared with us here today. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action to get your free download PDF of the action plan from this episode. Jordan, thanks so much for making time to come on the show.
You got it. Thank you for the opportunity.
And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success. Don't forget what I talked about before the interview. If you want to find balance, clarity, and focus, take the next step and go to jimharshawjr.com/apply. Space on my calendar is very limited, so claim your spot now. jimharshawjr.com/apply.